Hello everyone. Today we are going to review the movie Knock Knock, starring Keanu Reeves. This movie was directed by Eli Roth, who is probably right beside Wes Craven, one of my favorite horror and or slash thriller. Because I guess this was more of a slow burn for an Eli Roth movie. But yeah, still good nonetheless. Some of the acting in this was a little, I wouldn't say bad, but it was just different, I suppose, as to some of the other films I've seen Eli Roth produce. And obviously, it was a Lionsgate film, so if you're a big fan of Lionsgate, you know that they do a lot of horror, and when they do it, they normally do it right. But I wouldn't really call this but I wouldn't really call this one particularly a horror film. It was more of a, I guess it had horror elements, but it was more of a thriller film. So basically, we start off with this suburban family. They seem to be fairly happy. It's Father's Day. Uh, she's an artist and he's an architect, so they kind of seem like the perfect couple. They're obviously fairly rich, due to based on the house they live in anyway, or at least it looks that way. Anyway, he has to do work for the weekend, and she's going away with the kids to the beach. Unfortunately, he can't come due to work. Her friend, or I'm not really sure whether it was her friend or manager or somebody that works with her or for her. His name is Lewis. I guess maybe he helps her. He might be some sort of like manager type, because it looks like he is helping her with her book, or some sort of book that she's working on, probably to display more of her art and get it out more to the public. She's looking for the right color, I suppose, to her book, and she doesn't quite have it yet, but he says that it's perfect. Anyway, in the beginning of the movie, it seems like they're about to obviously have sex. The kids come in, then he says that he wants to continue where he left off, and he's referring to himself in the third person as the monster type deal to scare the kids away to continue. Anyway, she says, no, we'll continue later. Obviously, you can say that they're having some sort of marital problems, I would assume, because she mentioned something about some girl at an airport, and he said he was just trying to be a nice guy, and that's kind of where that ends. So there's some sort of underlying issue there. Anyhow, I guess maybe he's come close to cheating, or he has possibly cheated before. I'm not really sure whether that was what they were referring to or not, or whether he's just kind of a flirtatious person. Not really sure. Anyhow, so he's staying home while the kids are away. He FaceTimes with them the very first day. While they're gone, they seem to be having a good time at the beach. He FaceTimes with his wife again, and says that maybe he can come out when he's done his work. I think it was the very first night. Anyway, these two girls knock on his door. They say that they've tried all these other houses. They're looking for the Gregories, I think it was. He says he doesn't know anybody by that name that lives on that street. They said they've tried three other houses, but everybody turned them away. He lets them in, and then slowly but surely, as the night goes on, he calls them an Uber, because he says there's no way they're going to get a cab out where he lives, obviously. So he gets them an Uber. It's going to take about 45 minutes, and then they slowly start to seduce him, and by the time the Uber gets there, when he goes into the bathroom to give them their clothing, because it starts off with him calling them the Uber, and then they say, can we dry our clothes? And then they ask to use the washroom, and when he goes into the washroom to give them their dry clothes, the Uber is outside, and they're both naked in the bathroom. And then that's when they, I guess, kind of have performed their full seduction on him, because they end up having sex with him that night. And then the next morning he wakes up and he thinks that they're gone. Turns out they're not. They're in the kitchen making breakfast, which I guess really isn't, doesn't really seem like a weird thing when you've had a one night stand, I suppose. not, yeah, I guess it's not really a weird thing when you've had a one night stand to have somebody to wake up and have somebody make breakfast. I mean, some people don't feel awkward about that, I suppose, but most of the time, I guess the situation is you would think the other person would have left, right? So, he starts to get a little upset, obviously, because he's not single, he has a wife, so he starts to tell them to leave. That's when things start to get a little strange. I mean, it was kind of getting weird the night before, because it seemed odd that they seemed kind of invasive into his life, like they wanted to know a lot about him. And I mean, he was willing to tell them, and he never turned them away when he probably could have just said, hey, your Uber's here, like, get out of my house type thing, because that's what he decides that he's going to do the next morning. So yeah, eventually it escalates to the point where he actually calls the cops, and the one girl, Genesis, hangs up. So their names are Genesis and Belle. Genesis hangs up the phone and says, fine, can you give us a ride? So he gives them a ride to this random house that they say is the one that they're living in. Turns out, obviously, they're not, because they walk away from that house as soon as he leaves. And then the next night, everything seems to be going back to normal. He's working again, and then suddenly he hears something fall and break inside the house. So he goes out to check on what it was, and it's a picture of his family broken, which, I mean, I suppose anything could fall, but clearly he now thinks that somebody's in the house with him, and then Genesis hits him in the back of the head with, I don't know what, it looked like a fire extinguisher, but maybe it wasn't. And when he wakes up, he's tied to the bed. They film this video of him having sex with Belle, and yeah, it just, the whole aspect kind of gets weird from there, because they're basically, they say that they're playing this game with him due to the fact that he's a pedophile, because they lie about their age and say that they're teenagers. So basically, they say that a court would believe them over him due to the fact that they could just say that it was statutory rape. So it's just a little weird of a thing to do to anybody, really, no matter who they are. But I guess their whole game was, at the end of the movie, that nobody really says no matter how much they love their families, and I guess they checked all the other houses, nobody else was home, because they play hide and seek with him, and they threaten to kill him at the end of the movie, but then when it gets to the end and they bury him in the dirt with nothing but his head poking out, they show that they've posted this video from the night before that they made of him having sex with Belle to his Facebook account, because he leaves it logged in. So there you go. I guess they got him in a way. But Lewis comes over, I think it was the second night, because I'm not really sure how many nights they were actually there. I guess 2, because it was the weekend, right? So I guess maybe she must have been coming back on the Sunday or something, his wife. So they end up actually killing Lewis. I don't think that was part of the plan, but I mean, they were definitely crazy anyway. You could tell just from the way they were acting. But his Keanu Reeves' character's name was what? Why can't I think of his name? Evan, right. So Evan's defense was a little odd, because he said, what was I supposed to do? You guys came on to me, blah, 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 blah. Well, he could have easily just said no. So that seemed like a little, kind of a lame defense for him, because he could have just easily said no and just said your Uber's outside, or said, hey, this is not what I want to be doing. Like, I don't know. It just seemed like kind of an odd defense. Like, why not just, I don't know, do what you did and then live with it and just say, hey, have a nice day, like, bye-bye. He didn't have to be so rude the next morning, I suppose. He kind of seemed a little aggressive for what had happened the night before. But, I mean, I guess he wasn't necessarily happy with himself in a way too, so I can kind of understand, but nobody was really the good guy in this movie, I wouldn't say, because he could have done things differently, and obviously the girls should have done things differently because the way they went about breaking into his house again afterwards seems a little odd because it's like they were trying to get some sort of revenge or something for I don't know what. I mean, he does kind of have a point. They did come into his house and seduce him, so in a way, he's not 100% to blame, but he still could have done things differently. So yeah, that scene was a little odd where he was trying to defend himself, trying to make them look worse than they actually were for what they were doing, and making him look a little less worse for what he did. I mean, he still cheated. You shouldn't do that. So I guess the lesson here is don't cheat, and also don't let strangers into your house because my God, that was bad enough letting them in. It didn't seem so bad the first night. It seemed innocent until they started prying questions, and I was like, there's something not right here. Especially when they walked away from the house, I was like, yeah, I don't think they live anywhere. They were just looking for somebody to get something out of, and I guess maybe they were hoping for money in the beginning, but then it turned out that they wanted to basically ruin his life, and they completely trashed the house. And he said to his wife, he kind of jokingly said, like, him and Lewis said they're having some sort of, like, super secret party on the weekend. So when they come home, all the artwork's destroyed, the whole house is trashed, and then the kid goes, I guess Dad had a party. Meanwhile, they're going to find him buried in the backyard in this video on Facebook, and I don't know, they sent, like, text messages back and forth between, like, certain people's phones, from, like, him to Lewis, so, like, these girls were definitely diabolical. They knew what they were doing before they even started, because they start talking about the monster character that he was, so they were already spying on him before his wife even left on Father's Day. So, yeah, I guess maybe they were kind of the worst people out of the two because they were already watching him, so they were already stalking him before they even ended up coming to his house. But he should have turned them away, or at least just said, I'm calling you an Uber, or just driven them to wherever they needed to go originally. That would have made more sense. But anyhow, this movie was still good. Some of the scenes were a little odd, so I'll give it a 7 out of 10, just because it wasn't necessarily bad acting. It just wasn't. It seemed like some of the scenes dragged out a little more than they really needed to, and like unnecessary amounts of swearing where it didn't really need to be. It didn't add anything to this movie. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing. There's nothing against. I have nothing against swearing, but like, yeah, it was just an excessive amount for some of the scenes that were happening. It just wasn't really needed that much. But hey, I guess maybe it kind of added to the character a bit because it showed that he wasn't necessarily a perfect or good person himself. So, yeah, but that's my rating, 7 out of 10 for this movie. Wow, I didn't think I would actually talk about this movie this long. It's been almost 14 minutes. Anyway, please like, share, and subscribe this video, and comment down your... Comment your thoughts down below. Oh my God, on this film if you've seen it. If you haven't, please go see it because I still do think it's a good enough movie to warrant a watch. So, yeah. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye for now.